I've been carnivore now for 5 years, and I've stuck to this diet, basically meat, salt, and water, for 5 years straight. Very strict. And while my cravings are gone now, I don't have any cravings whatsoever for any kind of foods, I do want to go over some of the things that helped me initially to overcome cravings for certain foods. Because there's a certain strategy I would use, and it worked for me every single time. If I got a craving for a certain food, I would use this strategy, and I was able to overcome that craving and keep my focus on the foods I knew I should be consuming. The strategy I used, I like to refer to as risk versus reward. It's very simple. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. So essentially what I would do is I would take the food I wanted to consume, whether it be cake, cookies, dairy, because I ended up developing dairy allergies, candy bars, it doesn't matter. Any food that you would have some crazy cravings to. I would frame it like this. It's important to know that modern food has hijacked our minds. I mean, it really has. I did a video about this recently, so I'll put a link in the description below where I kind of talked about that. But modern food has hijacked our minds, and it's made us addicted, literally addicted to these foods, these hyper-processed foods, these sweets, all these things. And something that a lot of people don't realize is that the bacteria in our guts has actually been shown to adjust and adapt to eating certain foods. And it can make you crave sugar. If you've been eating a diet full of processed sugars and grains, then it's very possible that the bacteria in your body are actually triggering your mind to crave those foods because they want those foods and they need them to survive. So it can be really tough to overcome these cravings. It can be really tough to overcome the metabolic damage and the biological damage that these foods have had on your body and on your systems. But by using the risk versus reward system, I was still able to overcome these cravings pretty easily every single time. And eventually, once you do that for so long, it gets to the point where those bacteria are weakened, they die off, they're replaced with other bacteria that are now more adapted to eat the foods that you're now eating, and your cravings disappear completely. That's what happened for me. And I haven't had food cravings in at least probably 3.5, 4 years. But starting out, I know it can be difficult, so I want to share this with everybody. So the first question I would ask myself is, why am I craving this food? And this is very simple. Is your body craving it because it needs it to fulfill some sort of role in the body? Are you craving it because your mind is telling you you need it? And you can break this down just by looking at the food and what's in the food. So if you're craving something processed, let's say a donut, for example, there's a pretty good chance that you're craving that food because it's either your mind is craving it, it wants that dopamine hit, it wants that reward center activation, maybe the bacteria in your gut is triggering your mind to want it, or maybe it's the artificial ingredients in the food and the food itself that's actually triggering the craving, because these foods are designed to be addictive, and they are very addictive. So looking at the food first is a very quick way to determine whether or not you're craving it because you want it or craving it because you need it. Now, if you're craving a real nutrient-dense whole food, such as liver or meat or maybe fat, there's a pretty good chance your body needs that. And I know whenever I came from being chronically underweight and chronically ill to eating a diet that's full of nutrient-dense whole food, I craved it constantly. I mean, it's like I could not eat enough of it. I was eating probably 4 or 5 pounds of meat a day at 145 pounds. And I could probably eat more. And I, every time I was hungry, because I knew my body was craving those nutrients, I knew it had been so deprived and I was so deficient, there was something in there I needed. So, if you're craving that kind of food, there's a pretty good chance that you want to give into those cravings because it's something your body actually needs. So the second thing I would ask myself, what is the impact that this will have on me if I cave to my cravings? And what impact will it have on me if I don't? And this mostly applies to foods that you know are inherently bad for you, because obviously you know that if it's a food you're craving because it's needed for some sort of function in the body, if it's needed to fulfill some sort of requirement, the net benefit of consuming that food is probably going to be pretty high. So there's no real reason to ask that question when it comes to that. But if it's a food you know you shouldn't be consuming, asking yourself what impact it's going to have on you if you consume it or if you don't could be very helpful. So I know for me, if I submitted to my cravings and I consumed dairy, for example, the impacts would be very severe. Because when I got sick, I developed an allergy to dairy, and it caused some very, very bad side effects. I would get blisters in my mouth. I would get knots that would come up on the roof of my mouth. I would get ulcers around my gums. All kinds of crazy, nasty stuff would happen within 15 minutes of me consuming dairy. So I knew if I caved to my cravings, even though I love milk, but if I consumed milk, I knew what was going to happen. And you have to ask yourself, what's the impact? And is it worth consuming that food? And that ties into the third thing. And the third thing is that if this food can negatively impact my progress, is the 30 seconds or 1 minute of mouth pleasure worth hours or days of discomfort? And if you continue to consume it, is it worth a lifetime of discomfort? And that's a very important question, because if you know that this food is inherently harming you and it's bad for you and you shouldn't be consuming it, and the only real benefit you're getting out of it is that it activates those reward centers in your brain, makes you feel good for a moment, is it worth that discomfort? Is it worth that pain that it's going to be causing you? I mean, we really have to ask ourselves, what's more important? Is our health more important? Or is consuming this hyper-processed, hyper-palatable food that's going to activate our reward centers briefly, but make us feel miserable for the rest of the day, weeks, or possibly months, or is going to impact our lives negatively down the road, is it worth that? Is consuming that food worth a lifetime of misery? You know, I hear this argument a lot, and a lot of people say like, oh, I'm not willing to give up this food or that food, and I want to enjoy life, and I want to live life and eat the things I want to eat. But I think about it in terms of this. It's not uncomfortable for me to not consume these foods, because I know it saved me a lifetime of discomfort later. By focusing on foods I know that are nourishing me and that I know are a net benefit for my body and for my health, I know that later down the road I won't have to worry about all these problems. I won't have to worry about getting sick and not being able to do the things in life I want to do. That is not me not enjoying my life. To me, that's given me a more enjoyable life for my entire life. Because for that simple fact alone, the fact that we're only here once and we're here for a very short amount of time is precisely the reason that keeps me dedicated. Because I don't want to spend 1 second of that time being sick and not being able to do the things in life I want to do. And I know that by me focusing on real whole foods, foods that nourish my body and that I've found are best for me, is the way that will get me there. That's the way that's going to keep me disease free. It's going to keep me happy and healthy, so that I can enjoy every bit of my life and I don't have to suffer through any bit of discomfort. So sometimes all it takes is being willing to accept a little discomfort now to avoid a lifetime of discomfort later. And once we've accepted that little bit of discomfort, we might find that that discomfort is not so uncomfortable after all. So by me adopting this simple mindset, risk versus reward, I've been able to stay dedicated to this diet for 5 years straight without any motivation to want to deviate from it whatsoever. Cutting out certain foods that I know are going to do me harm, that I know are not optimal for me, when framing it in this mindset, is one of the easiest things I've ever done. And I think once you get to that point and you're able to identify the foods that are optimal for you and the ones that aren't, when you can get to the point where you can intuitively eat and inherently know what's good for you and what's bad, and you can add in the foods that make you feel optimal and remove the foods that don't, you'll never have to worry about cravings again. And you're going to know that what you're eating is exactly what you need to thrive. So let me know in the comments below if you've adopted a carnivore diet or any other diet for that matter, and if you had problems with cravings, and if this mindset helps you out. And if it did and it resonates with you, feel free to like, subscribe, join the Apex Tribe, and I'll see you in the next one.